Hey, you guys, welcome back to the channel. My name is Steven, accompanied by Queen Taylor, and today we're going to be taking a look at the real reason no one wants U.S. beef.
The real reason.
The real reason, like in caps. Yeah. This topic came up in a video we've done about, our U.S. foods that are banned in other countries video that we did a couple of months ago. And really just recently we've been kind of seeing a lot of stuff happening. I don't want to get too political. I don't want to get political, you guys. Don't get political, please. But the tariff situation, kind of, the talks about the trade deals that are going on, and there was a trade deal that struck with the EU, specifically about cars. And I was shocked to know that, beef wasn't one of them. But we recently read up when we were doing some of American Compared in the David Cross video that our beef and the way we process our food is not very good. But I don't know the specifics about it. So I'm hoping that this video fleshes out the specifics. So you guys, let's hop on over to the video and let's see why no one wants our freaking beef. And maybe our agricultural, whoever is in charge, can look at this and be like, hey guys, we need to do better.
Yeah.
Do better for our citizens. Do better for, our farmers, right? I don't necessarily think it's the farmers, do you?
No.
Maybe the processing, like the farmer who's raising the cattle to get butchered. It's the after it's butchered piece.
Yeah, I would think so.
Where it gets processed. I don't know. Guys, let's find out.
The European Union won't take chicken from America. They won't take lobsters from America. They hate our beef because our beef is beautiful.
The US president has announced a deal to boost beef exports to the European Union.
Because American beef is considered the best in the world.
The Americans basically say, we produce what we produce, and at the end of the process, we investigate whether that food is safe and secure.
There's no risk from consuming U.S. beef.
Some of our scientists, and by the way, some American scientists, have decided otherwise, that there is a risk.
I will not subject my children to anything that is unsafe.
If I wanted to put these guys on growth stimulants or steroids, I could take about 6 months off the time that they're here and get them up to that same weight, 15 to 1,600 pound range in 6 months less time.
Why can't we sell our product to the European countries?
Wondering why the United...
I mean, that just kind of answered it.
Yeah,
You can stop the video right now.
Yeah.
That guy just kind of spoiled it for everybody.
Cat's out of the bag.
You're putting freaking steroids to speed up the growth.
That's what
process?
I was thinking when you asked about if it's farmers. I'm like, there's probably some things that they could be giving the cows. I don't know if that would be, like injections of some sort or feed, maybe specifically some sort of like medications, anything that could potentially.
How is that legal? Is that organic?
I don't know.
Because I know like right now there's like a big trend on organic and grass-fed beef.
I think that's like, there's nothing. Like they're not getting any of that extra like barley stuff that might have certain things in it, however it actually is. I don't know. I'm not a farmer. But there's
growth hormones.
None of all those things. Like none of those things are in it.
That's wild. Those freaking bastards,
yeah,
they
like
knew this
hormones
forever.
And stuff. It's like hormone free.
States has had a decades-long battle with countries like Australia, Argentina, the United Kingdom, and the European Union over beef.
But they ban American beef.
And why don't other countries around the globe really want it?
They won't take any of our beef.
Well, let's take a look.
So here's one more thing. I promise I won't pause again. I just have to get this out. Wouldn't it be more advantageous for America to be able to sell their beef to other countries if they just stopped doing the bullshit that they're doing?
I mean, yeah, that's totally makes sense.
Wouldn't that make more sense? So, hey guys, we'll take your beef if you stop injecting them with, steroids. You don't allow it in humans, although they do. So take the HGH out and you could sell to our countries.
Mm-hmm.
That would be way more profitable, I think, as a farmer in a country than, nah.
Yeah, it might take longer, but it's long run.
in
way
the long
better.
run, yeah.
Earlier this month, United States President Donald Trump made it clear he's tired of beefing over beef.
They ban American beef, yet we imported $3 billion of Australian beef from them just last year alone. They won't take any of our beef. They don't want it.
As part of a sweeping tariff reform, his administration wants other countries to import more American beef. Now, this is actually really interesting because technically speaking, there actually isn't a ban on American beef in Australia. The US could import beef at any time if they wanted to. The problem is that American beef producers can't prove their American beef is American. Yeah, so to tell this story, we need to go back just a little bit.
Thank you. The fallout has already started, as we just heard shortly after the news of mad cow disease in Washington state broke out.
In December of 2003, the first case of mad cow disease, otherwise known as bovine spongiform encephalopathy, or BSE, was detected in the United States in a cow from Washington. When humans eat meat contaminated with BSE, they can become infected with what is known as Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease. Globally, 233 people are known to have died from this disease.
Wow.
With this risk in mind, significant international trade restrictions on U.S. beef were triggered, including a recall of around 4,500 kilograms of meat and increased testing and surveillance measures. While the outbreak in 2003 was limited to a single case in the United States, it heightened the potential risk of BSE and its impact on global trade. And rightfully so, countries like Australia and New Zealand wanted to protect their citizens. So as part of their joint organization, the Food Standards of Australia and New Zealand, or the FSANZ, they created a rigorous food safety check system based on the World Organization for Animal Health methodology. In short, any country seeking market access to import fresh beef products, which means chilled or frozen meat, not processed beef products, must undergo this BSE risk assessment. And keep in mind, these standards are put in place to help ensure the health and safety of Australian citizens, and these rules are applied evenly and fairly to anyone who wants to import beef into Australia. In 2015, the USA was actually granted Category 1 status, finding that the US had comprehensive and well-established controls to prevent BSE outbreaks in cattle and any contamination into the human food chain. But not so fast. You see, in the fine print, the provisional status specified that the animal from which the beef was derived must have been a, quote, continuous resident in the approved country since birth, which is actually a pretty big problem for the United States because we import a lot, and I mean a lot, of cattle from Canada and Mexico. An average of 700,000 cattle, buffalo, or bison from Canada each year between 2019 and 2023.
Wow.
And 1.2 million per year from Mexico over the same period, in fact.
So then why can't America just start raising their own cattle here in America and just have, because we've seen cattle farms and cattle fields. Is it just
Yeah, I mean,
pure...
I've worked with cattle firsthand a few times, and like I've watched them be born and grow, and I mean, you can. It's
I don't know.
It's a lot.
Australian authorities expressed that significant of a herd change would require a further science-based risk assessment. Furthermore, Australian cattlemen raised concerns about the traceability of cattle born outside the United States and argued that all beef imported to Australia should be subject to the same rigorous end-to-end traceability requirements as Australian producers. In all fairness, the United States actually does have a national traceability system put in place, but pretty much everybody is in agreement that it is nowhere near as rigorous as the electronic traceability system that exists in Australia. And this is pretty much the exact same reason why Argentina also doesn't allow the imports of American beef. An official ban on US beef has been lifted since 2018, but the country has maintained a restriction on live cattle imports until the two countries can finalize a new sanitary certificate. So there's actually a bit of a stalemate going on at the moment. On the one hand, the Australians and Argentinians feel very strongly that any beef that's imported into their country should be held to the exact same standards as the beef that's produced within their country. which I think is a fair ask. On the other hand, there are virtually no U.S. companies that are willing to take on the level of tracing that those two are asking for. There is.
I don't feel like that would be a big ask. Like I feel as like the traceability matrix is something that a lot of companies. So like imagine that same company will trace every single thing that comes in from a tooling perspective. So they'll have like a tag out, lockout schema or something for their tools and things so that they're making sure that the money is traced for any expenses or capital used. So why can't you do the same thing for the beef?
Oh.
Like you can't tell me, like we went to CVS and we bought these energy drinks. You can't tell me CVS doesn't know how many cans of freaking Red Bull, where the Red Bull came from, you know, like how much is in stock, etc. Why can't we have the same thing employed for our food?
Especially, it's more important.
It's
So many things can go wrong and people can get sick and people can die. So,
and even if you had a traceability matrix from Mexico or Canada, you could be like, hey, yeah, this cattle came in on this date from a shipment, you know, from this carrier to my facility. It's baffling. There's like, I don't know, we got 50 cattle today.
A feasible way where they could do that while still making their product a cost-efficient product to ship to such a far-off destination. But it actually isn't just Argentina and Australia that have bans on American beef. In fact, many other countries around the globe also restrict American beef products, although due to a variety of different reasons. For example, the Trump administration has also recently signaled out the United Kingdom and the European Union for, quote, non-science-based, end quote, restrictions on importing U.S. beef. Non-science-based restrictions. What does that mean exactly?
Right.
Well, to tell this story, we need to go back again, but this time over 35 years, specifically to the late 1980s and one of the longest, most acrimonious standoffs in world trade history. In 1988, U.S. meat exports to the area we now know largely as the European Union averaged 4,400 metric tons of beef muscle cuts and 68,000 metric tons of beef variety meats every year. However, in 1989, again, what we know today as the European Union and the United Kingdom restricted U.S. and Canadian beef imports due to health concerns. U.S. dairy and cattle farmers specifically routinely used hormones like estradiol and testosterone to promote faster growth and improve feed efficiency. The EU's ban rationale was, and continues to be, based on its own scientific evaluation showing that daily intake of growth hormones can have negative health impacts, including evidence that estradiol can cause cancerous tumor growth.
I believe that.
I 100% believe that.
I think that should be widespread. We shouldn't allow that
At
for
all.
our own beef.
Yeah, we shouldn't allow that at all. And what's crazy is if you look at the rise in cancer deaths and cancer, you know, just from the 70s, 80s to today, it's massive.
Yeah.
And I wonder if it's just because of years and years of eating, you know, testosterone boosting, steroid injecting meat, and why Americans have, you know, this grotesque like problem with their health.
Yeah.
It's crazy. Crazy, you guys.
In 1990, the year following the hormone ban, U.S. exports fell 86% for variety meats and 59% for beef muscle cuts. Facing this substantial market loss, the U.S. cattle industry argued against the EU's restrictions, saying food safety testing in the U.S. shows, quote, no risk to adult health, end quote, and took their case to the WTO for arbitration. Over the next couple of decades, yes, decades, there were a variety of WTO court cases, scientific squabbling, regulatory changes, and tariff threats as the United States and the EU duked it out over beef imports. Notably, one of the more significant arguments from the Europeans was that while, yes, they would concede that the use of hormones may not pose a significant risk to adult health, the entire population does not consist of only healthy adults,
Yes.
but also
Exactly.
infants, children, children, the
Right.
elderly, and the immunocompromised. Ultimately, the WTO actually ruled in favor of the United States in this case. However, it still took decades for a deal to be worked out. Final negotiations resulted in a new agreement, which was approved in 2019. The principal measures of this agreement was to see hormone-treated beef remain out of EU markets, and in return, for a promise of a higher duty-free access of US beef to EU markets. Specifically, the EU agreed to a raised 45,000-ton quota for non-hormone treated beef imports, and the US is allocated 35,000 tons of this quota, phased in over 7 years. Which sounds like a lot, and given the fact that the Trump administration held an entire signing ceremony in the White House over this new deal, you would think this was a huge win for US cattle farmers, right?
No.
Right? Nope, the EU pretty much got exactly what they wanted in the first place. You see, in order to facilitate a rise in US exports to the EU, the United States had already started the USDA's non-hormone treated cattle, or the
Yeah.
NHTC program.
Yeah, that's the sign that you'll see. Like if you're in a grocery store and you're buying meat, it's the grass-fed organic, and then you have this sticker on it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And this has been going on, and I noticed that there was like a real big trend in organic grass-fed beef.
Yeah.
Starting like a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
Like it just become a fad, and I always wondered why the shift. Like it used to be 100% Angus beef was a big thing, you know, in the Atkins diet, and now it's this. And also there's a way for them to increase prices on their consumers.
Yeah.
Because it is a hell of a lot more expensive. But that's all we wanted. We just wanted healthier meat. There shouldn't be.
But you're gonna pay for it. You're gonna pay to not have all those chemicals and things in your food.
Way back in 2001. Under this program, the USDA certifies that cattle have never been fed or treated with hormonal growth promotants, tracking cattle from birth through delivery to the packing plant door. This is basically a very similar quality control system to what exists here in the European Union, and basically confirms the fact that US beef producers, if they want to sell to the EU, will cease using growth hormones in the production of their beef. Again, under the negotiations from the Trump administration, it is only non-hormone added beef that is allowed to be sold to the European Union. But
that should be stepped up to there is no hormone beef allowed in the country.
Yeah. Allowed anywhere.
I'm actually really glad that the EU stuck to their guns there and really just didn't cave no matter what, you know, threats of tariffs, no matter what. They really kind of held strong. And she's not wrong. They're getting everything that they wanted. The EU won because we conceded and did all that because they really stuck to their guns.
Mm-hmm.
And that's great. And it's great for Americans too. So it helps both countries significantly.
And under the negotiations from the Trump administration, it is only non-hormone added beef that is allowed to be sold to the European Union. But it gets even more embarrassing for the United States because not only did they capitulate to the EU's original demands for non-hormone added beef, but the dog and pony show that the Trump administration put on in the White House, saying things like,
"This is a tremendous victory for American farmers, ranchers, and of course, European consumers, because American beef is considered the best in the world."
The reality is that this negotiation impacts a laughably small amount of American beef producers and U.S. beef products. Given the extensive documentation requirements for certifying cattle, many American producers have expressed that this production and certification is really just best suited for relatively small calving through finishing operations, and that cattle transfers would be pretty much impossible to do. And given the costs associated with registration, certification, and documentation, not to mention just the hoops you have to jump through in order to produce beef under these regulations, yeah, most farmers just aren't willing to do it. As of March 2025, according to the USDA, only 14 farms, ranches, or feedlots were registered under the NHTC program.
Wow.
That's right. Out of the 732,123 cattle farms across the United States, only 14 meet the hormone-free certification.
That is wild, actually.
Yeah, and you know what's crazy about that number is there's like some big, like Tyson, there's some big like conglomerate and corporations that should follow suit. And I wonder if the government can like provide some way to these farmers, because right now they do get tax incentives to be a farm. You get a tax break, you get funding to be a farmer. That's why farmers, there's a lot of work to be had, but there's a lot of money to be made as well.
Well, hopefully that's something else that RFK Jr. is going to work on is, with making America healthy again, is getting this stuff out of meats. And, obviously it's going to take some time to do all that, but I really hope that's something that he goes into. And it should not be 14. It should be the other way. Like those numbers should be opposite.
Right. Well, and that's what I'm saying. Maybe there's some kind of things that, our government can do to alleviate, that transition for these farmers. Because who, like, those farmers right there are catering to the McDonald's, to all the fast food chain restaurants, Yeah. It's crazy.
Process, or 0.00001% of farms.
Jesus,
now, to be fair, farms come in all shapes and sizes and production capacities. But even if we were just to look at total output, we're still talking about an exceedingly small amount of beef. In 2022, the U.S. produced 12.6 million metric tons of beef in total. Meanwhile, only about 33,000 of that was hormone-free beef sent to the European Union. In other words, about 0.25%, 0.26% to be exact,
That's nuts.
is what we're talking about here. And in this regard, I think you probably could make the argument that the EU is putting in kind of a pseudo-tariff barrier by requiring laborious and somewhat expensive documentation if beef producers want to import their beef here. However, I think it's also worth putting this all in the perspective of this phrase. If they wanted to, they would. Non-hormone-added beef in the United States is largely sold under the organic label and only accounts of 3% of total beef sales there. Granted, this market share is rising, but conventionally produced beef dominates the market, holding 92% of sales, and grass-fed beef the remaining 5%.
Because it's so much more expensive to get the grass-fed and so you have to get the conventional beef if you're a normal, like we spend the extra money to get the non-hormonal and grass-fed beef. We go, but it's not trendy.
And we don't always either.
And we don't always. And it's just because if you were to look in a grocery store in America, you would see 90% of it is the conventional beef.
Yeah.
The shit beef.
More than that.
And then you'll have like a little sliver here, and they might only put out 10 ground beef options for.
And you can't get those at every grocery store. There's particular grocery stores that have that, like non-hormonal or just all grass-fed beef.
Yeah.
Same with like cage-free chicken and, that kind of stuff as well. It's not everywhere.
Yep.
Yet while the organic beef is largely considered a luxury item in the United States, it's standard practice here in the European Union. In the EU, livestock are often fed diets that emphasize grass and forage, rather than the grain-heavy diets commonly used in the United States. And basic standards here prioritize natural feeding practices, with many farmers opting for grass-fed and organic feed to produce beef that is both high quality and nutrient-rich. Now, yes, this does mean that the wholesale price of beef here in the European Union is higher than that in the United States, and probably also contributes to the statistic that Europeans just don't eat as much beef as Americans do. But in the United States, we hear this argument often that U.S. beef producers couldn't possibly switch to an organic means of production, that not using hormones would be incredibly expensive and the beef market would collapse. But I really kind of have to question that, because if the EU can do it, why can't the United States?
Yes.
Yeah.
And that brings me to my final point. The thing to keep in mind is that even if the United States started only producing organic beef tomorrow, for places like the European Union, Argentina, and Australia, they don't need US beef per se. In all the countries and economic zones that I just listed, production capacity actually exceeds domestic demand. Australia, for example, produces significantly more beef than it consumes, exporting around 68% of its total beef and veal production. Argentina, ranked, by the way, as #1 in the world for beef consumption per capita, also produces far more beef than is consumed domestically. And
so
the
they just
EU,
don't need it.
while not as heavy on the beef diet, as a whole is still largely self-sufficient in beef, producing more than is consumed domestically each year, leaving a relatively small exportable surplus of about 8 to 10% of production. It is, however, worth noting that the UK specifically does not have a beef surplus. And I want to make this distinction because the United Kingdom is no longer part of the European Union thanks to Brexit. However, that being said, the vast majority of the imports that the UK has of beef largely come from Ireland. It's somewhere in the ballpark of 76%. But on a larger meta level, the UK and the EU's ability to produce high-quality goods also skews the agriculture and food trade deficit. We mostly export high-value products here: wine, spirits, charcuterie, olive oil, cheese, while the US exports low-value commodities: soybeans, feed corn, wheat. The fact that these have lower unit value is due in part to the fact that they largely haven't been refined into an end-user product yet, which is important to consider, specifically when you think about how production influences consumer spending habits. I've made a couple of videos on this topic in the past, but it's just important to underscore one more time of just how different food production and specialty goods impact the way people shop and buy between the United States and Europe. Farms in the US, on average, are 10 times bigger than in the European Union, and they're able to churn out raw materials, hunks of meat, blocks of cheese, silos full of cereals and grains. But the EU is largely the opposite, a mosaic of small, regionally diverse farms. Its producers are uncompetitive in most commodities, but possess an advantage in traditional foods. For example, the continent has 5 times more geographical indication trademarks than the United States, allowing its farmers to transform simple crops into premium goods. When you go to the grocery store, the produce is labeled loud and proud with its place of origin. Regional goods have special bright yellow stickers, and so whether you're buying eggs, milk, flour, noodles, honey, beef, and beyond, consumers here demand to know where their products came from and prefer to buy local. And again, in another video that I've made on the subject, which, by the way, I'll link all of this down below in the description of this video, this same preference for locally sourced organic ingredients also extends to fast food as well. With major chains like Burger King, Subway, and McDonald's advertising and investing heavily in farm-fresh ingredients with short supply chains. Quite frankly, you're not going to find US beef in your McDonald's Big Mac here in Germany, despite the fact that it's one of America's largest international fast food chains. By and large, European consumers don't want it. And by the way,
good for them.
That Big Mac, despite having locally sourced organic ingredients, costs the exact same here in Germany as it does in the United States.
Wow.
Interesting food for thought for this week for sure. But I would love to hear your thoughts down below in the comment section. Beef imports specifically have been such a huge part of the dominating tariff discussion that's happening in the United States and the European Union right now. But I think really when you dig into the numbers and you learn more about the history of trade, specifically with beef, it reveals a lot about consumer spending habits and what consumers are ultimately willing to pay more for to keep things local and organic and hormone-free. But this has just been my interpretation of the data. Again, I'd love to hear your thoughts and reactions down below in the comment section, so please let me know below. And as always, if you enjoyed what you saw today, be sure to hit that thumbs up button. And for more content from Type Ashton, hit that subscribe button. So
that's awesome.
I'll see you next Sunday. Cheers!
Oh, I like that. She's citing her sources
Yeah, I
here
was
at
just
the
gonna say,
end.
that's cool.
Let me see. That's exceptional. I actually really enjoyed this video. I thought that the information presented to us, everything that came in, every source that she had shown on screen, she had a source from which she derived that from.
Mm-hmm.
I really appreciated that about her work.
Yeah.
It definitely sounds like she went into great depths of research for this video. I appreciate it.
Yeah, she wasn't just talking to talk. She
read up.
Yeah.
She knew the internet was going to watch this.
Yeah. She's like, I am going to do my due diligence.
And there's
Be
probably
as precise as possible.
a ton more information to back up her claims, but also, I also think there's a lot that she left out. And one of those things is political climates, because I feel as though in the 60s and 70s, we started seeing cases of heart disease pop up in America, and they immediately triggered that to beef and red meat. So for 30 or 40 years, we changed our, the general surgeon's food pyramid, the FDA's food pyramid changed. And instead of it being a more balanced diet, they made it into a very carbohydrate. They changed the food pyramid and changed the behaviors, and people stopped eating, raw, lean meat as much as they did back in the 60s and 70s. And that's why I think a lot of Americans are just straight up fatter, is because of the way we've been eating for 40 years. I think it's just been, and then of course you have, the cigarette companies that got into making foods more addictive, like we've learned. Like, I 100% believe that, and I know that to be a fact.
Yeah.
When Philip Morris is buying, the people who make McDonald's burgers, and what McDonald's did to their own food for Americans, it's shit. And any country, and this is what's so unfortunate, is anyone with any common sense knows that this is the real thing. And she was talking about pride and where, sources of beef came from, or just any product. I only see that in certain commodities, like Florida oranges. Like, if you got yourself a orange juice and it's from Florida, damn it, it's going to be good.
Well, and specifically for beef, like Omaha steaks is, people from all over the country get Omaha steaks imported in for their beef because it's the best beef you're going to get in the country.
Yeah. And so that's because they have the other thing I would also like to point out is not everywhere in America has suitable conditions to raise cattle and livestock like that. Like in Florida, it's kind of difficult. I know that there are places you can, but there's, I don't expect local farmers to be able to produce things in certain climates in America. So that's why you see a lot of our cattle and hay and wheat, that's all produced in the West, where the climate is just ripe for that kind of agricultural farming. It's interesting. And even if we did just have like one centralized location where all the beef in America was produced here in Iowa, which I think it kind of is in Nebraska and Iowa, why can't they just do organic? Like, why? Like, what margins are you?
Yeah, and for them to say that it's too expensive because of documentation and all that, I'm sure it's going to start out that way, but there's got to be a process to make it easier, to make it less expensive. The people that are, all that money is going to move around. The people that are providing all these hormones and stuff, they're going to lose their money. Yeah, but maybe then that's a good initiative for them to get into things that's going to make this like more of what it should be. And they can be like, hey, this isn't working anymore, so let's go into a business where we can make documentation an easier process and just kind of divert everything instead. I mean, I know it's one thing completely different than the other, but you should want your families to be eating as good as they possibly can. And when there's hormones and basically just poisons and all these different things, then it's just impossible.
From a commodity standpoint, where these other countries they outproduce what they're actually giving. Maybe domestic imports of beef isn't an important thing to them. And I do think that there is definitely in the early 2000s with the Atkins diet and stuff like that. I definitely think there's been an insurgence in consuming beef for protein, especially here in America. So I agree. We eat a shit ton of beef.
Yeah.
It's in our culture to have burgers, steaks. It's just a regular occurring thing for us in America.
Yeah.
So why not feed us like raw, lean, clean beef? It doesn't make any sense to me.
Yep.
It's almost like they're concerned about the processes changing, but the processes, it's like a company that used to write down everything on paper, trying to digitize that and put it into Microsoft Excel. You know what I mean? But Excel is so much better than writing it down.
Yeah.
And it can stay there forever. I don't know. I digress. But this was an interesting video. I really enjoyed it. What do you think? You have any words to add?
No, I don't think you've said anything that I could have imagined to say.
There's probably a lot more that I do want to say.
I know there is.
But I'm gonna hold myself. So guys, if you want to have a conversation, leave in the comments what you think. I think it's kind of crap, and I think we all know it's all common sense, you guys.
Yeah.
It is. We know it's common sense. You know it's common sense. Our government is just like effing us in the name of capitalism, and you know it.
Yeah.
I know it. It's shitty, and hopefully things will turn around for the better. But guys, that's our time. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye.